Happy video day, guys. So if you guys didn't know, a brand new palette just finished releasing, and thank you guys so much for tagging me on Instagram about this palette. I was eyeing it. I knew it was coming out. I had already been working on my little swatches for Make Up Your Mind, and I am ready to share with you guys my results. And it is the Norvina Volume 4. If you guys have seen it already, it looks just like this, and I will say, out of all the Norvina palettes, this one is probably the one that caught my attention the most. Some of the other ones I really just wasn't interested in them. These are pigment palettes, and it is a very pretty palette. It's going to be retailing for $60. So right when I saw that this was releasing, I decided it is time to do a Make Up Your Mind. So that is what we are doing in this video. We're going to be looking through my entire collection to see if I can create a very similar color story using palettes that I already own. So if you're new to this type of video, this is a buying strategy video. Basically what we do is we look through our own personal collections and we try to mimic the color story with things that we already own. Anytime a brand new eyeshadow palette releases, instead of just going ahead and purchasing it, what I do is I sit back, I look through my collection, and I start to see if I can find similar hues in my collection. I'm not looking for dupes because I don't own the palette. What I am doing is I'm looking for similar colors to see if I can mimic the color story. Then after I do mimic my color story, I kind of decide, is this a color story I'm going to use a lot? Do I think I really want this palette? And a lot of times too, guys, just taking that minute to sit back and look through your collection, sometimes you just realize you have a lot of warm tone palettes. Maybe you don't need another one. Or you have a lot of colorful palettes. And even though the color story is pretty, you found 50 other pinks that you feel like maybe you should use before buying another one. So that's basically what we do. I look through my entire collection and I try to mimic palettes before I purchase them, and then at the end of the video I decide for myself whether I think it's worth it for me to pick up a particular palette. Of course, I don't expect for you guys to own the same palettes as me. You guys have your own palettes. Maybe you'll have some that I have, and maybe you'll have some that even have more similar hues in your collection. So that is what we're going to be doing. I will tell you guys, this was not the easiest palette. There's so many colors in here. This took me quite a while to even find stuff that looks similar. So I think I did a decent job. I think I was able to find some of the colors. I feel like some of them are not exactly exact, but I was able to come up with something similar, and there was primarily two palettes that I feel like a lot of the colors were coming out of. So if you do own those two palettes, you may want to look at those before purchasing this one. Before I show you my results, if you guys are new, my name is Christina Brooke. We love to talk about makeup here. I also throw in a little bit of fashion. If you guys are new and you've never seen me before, I would love it if maybe you would hit the subscribe button, join the family so you can see me again. I do a Make Up Your Mind every single week on either a brand new release or something that released fairly new. So let's go ahead and let's get into the results of the Norvina Volume 4. Now you can see it. These are my results. I was able to kind of mimic this palette to the best of my ability, and I really feel like a lot of these tones I was able to find. And the ones that I feel like I wasn't able to find, it's not like they were the standout tones. So if you guys notice in eyeshadow palettes, there's sometimes very cool colors, and those cool colors are sometimes surrounded by not so cool colors. They're like basic colors, you know what I mean? Like they're browns, they're lighter browns. And sometimes those basic colors, you may have them 50,000 times over inside of your collection. You just need to sometimes focus on those cool colors that really pop out to you. And also, how many of those are there? Is there only two? Are you paying for an entire palette to only get two cool colors that you might not have and all the rest of them you own? That's stuff that you need to decide on your own with your own collection. I will tell you, in my collection, I felt like a lot of the really cool colors, I was able to find them. So the first thing I always do is show you guys the palettes that I jumped into, just in case you guys have these. You can pull them out with me. The first one I pulled out was Rustic Glam from Dominique Cosmetics. I did get like two colors from here. One of the palettes that I feel like had a lot of the tones, like a lot of similarities, was actually the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. This is the original palette. I feel like a lot of the browns and some of the shimmery pinky tones, you can find them in here, at least stuff that is pretty similar. I did have to grab one tone from Tropic. This is the mini Tropic. I also grabbed, I think it was one tone from the mini Retro from Natasha Denona. I also had to jump into Nude Light from Huda Beauty. Is that a coincidence or what? Every single one of these videos so far has had this palette in it. I feel like this is like, if you guys want to be like super in for spring, summer, I feel like this is the palette to buy. Carly Bible, I did have to go in here for a few tones. I feel like Carly Bible was probably the third runner-up with the most colors that I could find. ColourPop, this is the Yes Please. I only got one color from here, but I really felt like I needed that one color. The other palette that I felt like had a lot of the tones was the Sephora Pro. This is the editorial one, which I'm so happy I added this to my collection because I have jumped into it so many times for these type of videos because I feel like it just really had it really has like a very good array of colors, very universal for like, you know, very bright, fun looking lids. So there is a lot more palettes in here than usual. I usually try to stick to 3 or 4. In this one we have 8, and that is because there is a lot of colors in here, and I will give it to Norvina on this one. I do think that they went outside of the box with some of these colors that you literally had to pull another palette. There was like no way that this lilac would be in this color story in most palettes. So I did have to pull into a few palettes that were just unexpected. So let's go ahead and let's start with the first one. So the first tone, now this was a tricky one. This would probably be one that would be unique to most people's collection. For me, I don't feel like it's that unique because I have seen this similar kind of tone in 2 different palettes. One is in the Charlotte Tilbury Starry Eyes to Hypnotize, which is the one that I use to mimic the mini Retro when I did my Make Up Your Mind for this one. And the tone I'm talking about is this one right here. It's called Industrial. Now, I feel like the one that's going to be inside the Norvina palette will go a little bit more gray, and this one has a little bit more green to it. But the reason that I use this one is because when you blend this on the lid, it looks like a grayish tone. So I feel like this is going to be a similar tone to what is inside of the Norvina palette. Swatched in a bunch of different swatches when I was looking at this, it reminded me of this tone. So I think that this is going to be something that is going to be within, like it's going to be in that lane. The Norvina palette's already starting on a high note for me because I really like that tone. And that tone, a little bit grayer, I think I'd still like. So the first color, I like it. I feel like I own something pretty similar, but I'm already liking the color story. The first color, at least. So for the next color, we're going into like those purples that Norvina loves to put these type of colors in her palettes. I know she's a huge purple fan, and these are the type of purples that I personally don't love. Inside of the Huda Mini Nude, there's this color right here that's kind of like a lilac-y purple. It's gonna give you something similar to what I'm seeing inside of the Norvina palette. I feel like this is one of those colors that maybe if you have the actual Norvina palette, you might find some of these tones. I don't own that palette, so I couldn't reference it. But this is like one of those tones that I feel like I've seen a lot of times and I don't use ever. I mean, I have it, like I'm saying, in this palette right here. And let's say that this color went more purple, a little bit more purple, or it went a little bit more pink. It's still not my type of tones, you know? So this is like that baby purple. Not a huge fan of that. So the second color, so the next one is also another one that when I saw it, the only thing that kept going through my head was stained lids for years. This is a pigment, so it's definitely gonna stain. And it's also like a bright pink. So I jumped into editorial, and what I did was I grabbed a little bit of this color right here, but on top of it I added a little bit of this color. When you mix those 2 colors, you do get a deeper pink, and it's a cool color, but these are like those very like editorial type of colors for me. I don't typically wear these type of pinks. Like, they're just not my style. I think they're cool to have in one palette, but it's not like I would be going out of my way to buy a lot of palettes with those type of tones. In my personal collection, I feel like I have this type of color enough, and variations on this type of color is not enough for me to want to buy it. It would have to be like super deep, and it's not. So the next one, I was having a little bit of a harder time finding, and I actually was referencing a few colors in Metropolis, and I was like, I think I'm gonna stick this way. Then I kind of looked at the actual image of the palette and I looked at some of the other swatches and I ended up just saying, you know what, this is kind of reminding me of Jaclyn Hill. Now, if you look at the Jaclyn Hill palette, a lot of like the brown tones I found in her color story. Like I felt like I was able to find a lot of the brownish tones here. I jumped into this color right here. It's called Puke. So this color right here called Pukey kind of reminds me of this tone. Now, looking at the swatch, it almost looks like it's a little bit cool, but then it has a little bit of warmth to it. So I'm going with Pukey and saying that this is going to be similar. I looked at a few different swatches and this tone in a few of the swatches looked similar to Pukey than almost any of my other palettes. So that's why I'm going in this route. The next two, I will tell you from the entire palette, the next two are giving me such a hard time. And it's funny because the next two are like colors that, honestly, I don't need more of. They were giving me a hard time, but I don't need more of these type of tones. So the first one, I ended up just going, you know, I'm just gonna stick with this. Let me tell you, I went through so many palettes, swatching and swatching, and I feel like this one is supposed to have a little bit more of a pinkier undertone. But from the swatch, I just ended up saying, you know what, Maud, inside of Carly Bible, this looks similar, and swatched, I don't know. I just saw so many different swatches of this and I was like, you know, it's gonna be something similar to this from all the different swatches that I see. If it has a little bit more pink in it, I mean, you could just go ahead and jump into this color right here called Boy and add a little bit of that to this one and it will turn it a little bit more pink. I saw so many different swatches and I was really having a hard time with this one and I just said, you know what? I think I'm just gonna go with Maud. And that's where I left it. I left it with Maud. The next one was another one that it looks goldish toned. I decided to stick with Carly Bible. And this color called My Angels just went way too gold. Like this is like pure gold. But if you throw Maud on top of it and you mix them together, they create a lighter gold that really is very reminiscent of the swatches that I keep seeing. I just ended up going with that one too because those two, I'm telling you, were the ones that were really giving me a hard time. When these, I don't know what it is about these golds, but they always can manipulate a gold to make a gold look a little bit different. But at the end of the day, these type of tones are used as toppers and as accent colors. I always feel like the colors always can look pretty similar, these type of topper tones. So I ended up just going with that. So now let's get into the ones I'm a little bit more confident about. Now the next one I was looking and I found inside of Carly Bible too. There's this color called Stev. Stev in the pan looks red. When swatched, it gives you more of a darker burgundy-ish red. So it actually is a lot darker when swatched. It is what I used on my outer edge to kind of smoke out the outer edge. The look that I created today is a look you could probably create with the Nude Norvina 4 palette because I did use colors that I swatched on my arms today. So I did use that to smoke out the outer edge. I feel like this tone is going to be pretty spot on to what's inside of the Norvina. So the next one I decided to just go back into Jaclyn Hill, because anytime I looked at any of these brownish tones, I just stuck to Jaclyn Hill because I just felt like a lot of them looked like they were coming from this type of theme. I jumped into this color called Butter, and when this color was swatched and I really was playing with it a lot, I really felt like it is pretty in line with what I'm seeing in the Nude Norvina 4. So I feel like so far, like a lot of the brownish tones, I really am sticking to Jaclyn Hill. So the next one, I was having a little bit of a hard time off of the swatches because I really, like I said, I don't love the ABH swatches. I feel like the swatch that I looked at from Trend Mood 1 and also from somebody else who posted to Trend Mood 1, it looks like a combination of this color called Meeks with a little bit of the color Hustle on top. So if you mix Meeks and Hustle, it gives you like this brassy tone that actually almost leans towards the purple side. And I really honestly just felt like after I swatched it, I looked at the palette, I looked at the Trend Mood 1 swatches, and then I re-looked at the ones that were in the Norvina actual post. I said, you know what, this looks similar. So the next one I actually was reading, this one gave me a harder time because it almost looked like it was a gray, but I wasn't sure because it almost swatched looking like a dark brown, like almost like a cool tone brown. But when I read it, it actually said it was like a grayish tone. Now, this one's a little bit of an oddball, but I remember that inside of the mini retro, this color that almost looks green on screen is actually described as a gray green. So what I did was I grabbed this gray green, and when it swatches, it really does look like a cool tone brown. And I grabbed a little bit of the pink and I added them together, and this and gray green together gave me a tone that almost looked like this gray tone. I didn't want to just grab a gray color because it wasn't gray. It's almost like it looks brown, but it's not. This is another tone that I feel like in the palette is going to be hard for a lot of people to find and is very unique to the Norvina palette. I feel like already two colors are extremely unique. Like, I don't feel like a lot of people will find, and this is one. This is going to be difficult unless it's so similar to this color inside of the Natasha Denona Mini Retro. I'm not sure, but I feel like it's going to be close enough that when it's blended on the lids and used as an outer edge dimensional color, you may not be able to tell the difference, but we'll see. Okay, so the next one, I ended up having to deepen out the color a little bit. I first went into Jaclyn Hill and I jumped into Faint, which is this color, and then I felt like it was too light. So what I did was I jumped next door and I used this color called Sissy. And I feel like Sissy is almost like the perfect pink, that perfect pinky metallic that I feel like I think she used in the palette. That's the color that I have like all over the lid. It does look a little bit lighter on camera than it is in person, but I feel like it is that type of pink color. Like, I feel like the first few were more of her neutrals with a little bit of fun to it, but then like now you start to get like the more interesting tones. It doesn't mean that I don't have them, it's just that they were more interesting. What I did for the next one is I jumped into the Edit palette from Sephora, and I went into this fourth color on its own, and it gave me that real shocking pink, which honestly, guys, I'm kind of tired of. I really am. I'm so tired of that pink, but I feel like that is very similar. Let me know if I'm wrong below, but I feel like every time I see the Norvina palettes, they always have like this shocking pink in them, which I'm kind of over. Okay, so the next one is actually a tone that I thought was beautiful, and I feel like if you can create it if you have Carly Bible. Carly Bible has this color called Jode, which I love. Look at that color. Jode is so pretty. I love that color. But if you add a little bit of this color called Mandela, which is more of like a purple, it's a lighter purple, and you start mixing them together, the tone starts to shift a little bit and get a little bit of a lighter purple. And I feel like you can create that color with the Carly Bible palette, and I love Carly Bible. This palette's so good. So even though I think that's a very cool color, I feel like I would rather give the love to Carly Bible because I need to use that color in that palette a lot. The next one is where she really threw me for a loop because she included this like lilac in there, and I was like, okay, lilac, where'd you come from? But Natasha Denona's Mini Tropic has this lilac tone right here. I need to use this palette. I have this lilac tone. How many times do I use it? Probably hardly ever. That's why this palette has not hit pan or anything like that. But I do have a lilac tone in my collection that I never use. I feel like the one that's inside of the new Norvina may be close to the one that's in the Tropic. If they're off by like tad, like very small, I don't hardly ever use lilac anyways, so I shouldn't be staring at this palette for a lilac shade that I know I don't use. So the next one, I had to actually jump into the Yes Please from ColourPop because I couldn't find this tone in any of these palettes that I had picked, and there was no way to create it. So I jumped into this second row in this third color right here, and it gives me, I feel like, a really similar tone to what I'm seeing in Norvina. It's almost like a close color to the Stev color, like this kind of reddish tone, but it goes a little bit lighter, like it almost introduced a little bit of orange to it. And I feel like off the swatches, it looks like it's going to be pretty similar. And I'm already seeing a pretty cool color story. But the thing I see with the Norvina palettes is I almost feel like they're kind of like all over the place with the color story. Like, I look at this and I see something pretty. It's a little bit more put together than I feel like some of the other ones. We still got a few more tones. So the next one, I ended up just saying, you know what, I want to go into the Jaclyn Hill palette because I did find a color inside of Metropolis that looked really similar. But I ended up wanting to just use this color called Creamsicle inside of the JH palette. But what I did was add a little bit of this color up here called Silk Cream. So Silk Cream and Creamsicle give you a brownish tone. I almost feel like you could probably just use Creamsicle on its own, and when these colors are blended, I feel like it might lean a little bit more like a yellowish tone. That's what I'm just looking at the swatch, and that's what I'm kind of seeing, but that's what I'm thinking. Okay, so now the next color we had to jump back into Editorial. And I really was looking at this palette and going, wow, That's a fun color to have added in this palette, but I remember that inside of the editorial palette, there was this color right here that I always thought was a cool color, but I hardly ever use. It's like a limeish yellow. It leans yellow, but it looks lime in the pan. But when you swatch it, it goes more yellow, and it's just like a neon yellow green. I feel like that looks similar. I feel like that's almost the tone that I see in all these swatches. So that color, which was supposed to be like the standout, like wow, feel like I have it. And it's not that wow for my collection, to be honest, because I have it and I don't think I have used it. So the next one is another one that from the swatch I had a little bit of a harder time, and it always happens with these more brassy tones, but I ended up just saying, you know what, this one looks a little bit like a goldish brassy tone. I ended up just going into Jaclyn Hill and just grabbing this color called Queen and thinking that it looks similar. I mean, from the multiple different swatches that I pulled from, I don't know. It looks similar to this color, and I just honestly just felt like within the color story, the golds are really, I don't know, the golds and the brassy colors are not going to be what would make me want to buy this palette, because the reason I'd want to buy this is because of the colors in here, the colorful colors, not really the basic color. Now, the next one, what I did was I went into the mini nude again, and I jumped at this color right here that's like a very, very pink, but I feel like this palette has a little bit more of a lilac-y pink. So I added a little bit of this tone on top, and when they mix together, you do get like a pinky, purpley tone that is so cute. Not my style, but cute. Okay, so the next two I actually found in one of my favorite palettes, and that is inside Rustic Glam. It's this color right here called Suede, and Suede is a kind of like a warmer, it looks similar in the swatch when I swatched it, and I do believe that if anything, this one is the most similar in my collection to this tone. I feel like I kind of found that one, and I love the Rustic Glam. Like, it's like amazing. And looking at it, I kind of saw the next color, which is this one called Wildflower. This is the color that I put all over my lids today, and it is the most amazing, beautiful pink. And it's almost like a baby pink, but it doesn't go exaggerated. I feel like the one in the Norvina might be even more exaggerated than this one. It might go more baby pink, but this one is just like that perfect pink. So I pulled this one and I said, this looks similar. May not be exact, but I like the Wildflower color better. So the next one was one of those other ones that could be like, oh my goodness, I don't have anything like that. But I do remember inside of the editorial palette that I showed you guys before, there was this really cool crumbly shade right here that actually almost looks like glitter, and it's like a grayish glittery tone, and when it's swatched it looks so similar to the swatch that I'm seeing inside the Norvina palette. The Norvina might have more glitter in it because I was looking at the texture and I can't tell if the texture is like an actual glitter, and if it is, less reason for me to love it, because I honestly don't use glitters. Like, I tried. I bought the Tati Beauty textured neutrals for those glitters so that I can have ever glitter in the world, and I hardly ever put it on my lids because I don't want it all over my face or in my eyeballs, so I hardly ever use it. So I think that this one might actually have more glitters in it, and if it doesn't, then I feel like this color is pretty close. I had to go into my mini nude for the next one, and it is a color that I feel like I've seen a lot lately, and it's this really pretty color. This is probably my favorite color inside of the mini nude. It's so pretty. It's like almost a pink, but it goes a little bit more brassy. It's like a brassy pink. It's a really cool tone. It's kind of like what I'm predicting is inside of the Norvina palette, and it's a really cool tone. I like the way it looks, and I do use it a lot, but I have it in mini nude. Okay, so the next one was another one of those tones that when I looked at it, I go, this is like tones that I love to use for outer edge smoking, and I actually didn't even remember, and this is how bad it gets when you guys end up buying too many palettes. I didn't know that Jaclyn Hill had this beautiful color right here called Jack Z, but it's such a pretty tone. It's very close to Stev, but it actually goes deeper, and it's more of like a burgundy, and it's really nice. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the tone that you see in the Anastasia Soft Glam as well. But I really like that tone. It's beautiful, but like I said, I've already mentioned two palettes that I feel like have something within the same color family. And the last one, the last tone in this palette ended up throwing me for another pink. In the edit palette, there is this color right here, the third color, that is more of a magenta-y pink. And looking at what I see, inside of the Norvina palette, it looks like this is the deepest pink. Now that I have swatched it all on my arms and I basically have the color story right in front of me, I'm staring at it. I wish you guys can see it the way I'm looking at it. Swatched on my arm so that I can kind of like get an idea. The camera always adds more brightness, so that's why I take all my photographs in natural light with no flash so that you guys can really get a true color. But looking at this palette, I'm going to say this is the prettiest Norvina palette that she has come out with. Looking at the swatches and looking at what the color story may look like. Now, my only issue for me personally is a few of the colors that I am in love with in this palette, I am in love with in other palettes. Then some of the colors that I cannot stand in this palette, I really honestly can't stand. We've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 3 hot pink colors in here that I will never use. So I know there's already 3 colors in here that are throwaway colors for me. We also have the very lime color, very cool color, but I kind of have it in editorial. I don't need it again. So I already have 4 colors that I will not be using. The lilac, like I said, it's a cool color, but I have something similar in Mini Tropic that I hardly ever use that I need to use. And you know, some of the other tones are pretty, but I don't feel like they are so unique that I need to buy it. I feel like this was one of those color stories that was very well put together with pops of color to make you interested, but not fully unique enough for me to want to pick up. So I'm gonna have to say from right now, I'm gonna make up my mind and say I will not be picking up the Norvina Volume 4. It's a cool palette. I do think it has a really interesting color vibe to it, and if this is like a color story that you really lean for, I do think that this may be really interesting for you because laid out together, it is a cool color story. It's just not my color story, and it's not something that I'm going to use, especially when I can notice that the pops in here are not pops that I technically use a lot, so it's not really worth it for me to pick up. Now, another thing is it's a pigment palette. My lids are so sensitive to pigments. I itch, my eyes get irritated the next day. So even if this was a color story I loved, I probably would not be able to pick it up anyways because her palettes are all pigments. I can't work with pigments, unfortunately. I guess I'm allergic to it. I also cannot stand things that really stain. I understand that most eyeshadows that are like pink stain, I get it, but pigment stain, like they stain. So those are a few negatives. Now the color story, like I said, very cool. I think it's an interesting color story. I think that a lot of people might actually really enjoy this. I want to know from you guys if you guys have similar palettes in your collection. Do you think that this is a must for you? Leave me those comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week in a brand new Make Up Your Mind with a brand new palette. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.